Let's get right into it. Number 10, negativity magnet. You don't like bad news. You don't seek it out like a hobby. And yet, the moment something terrible happens anywhere on Earth, your brain leans forward like, oh, is this about me? This is called the negativity bias, which is a fancy way of saying your brain treats bad information like it's radioactive, but in a must-stare directly at it kind of way. From an evolutionary standpoint, this made sense. Missing good news meant you didn't celebrate. Missing bad news meant you got eaten. So your brain learned a very simple rule: danger first, vibes later. The problem is your brain never updated the software. It still reacts to a mildly alarming headline the same way it once reacted to a tiger rustling in the bushes. That spike of attention, that's your amygdala, your internal panic intern yanking the steering wheel and screaming, "Look at this or we die." Meanwhile, positive news requires effort. It's calm, subtle. It doesn't threaten you. So your brain files it under optional reading and moves on. Bad news, on the other hand, feels urgent, personal, and weirdly important, even if it's about a bridge collapsing in a country you've never visited. And this is just the warm-up, because later on we're going to talk about how your brain doesn't just notice bad news, it rewards you for consuming it. Yeah, that's where things get uncomfortable. Basically, your brain is a smoke detector that goes off when you make toast and then demands you stare at the toaster in fear. Number 9, the attention hijack. Imagine you're peacefully existing and suddenly your phone buzzes with breaking news. Not news, breaking news. Your brain instantly assumes something has snapped in half and is coming for you. That's because novelty plus threat is the most powerful attention cocktail your brain knows how to mix. Bad news is usually unexpected, emotionally charged, and framed like a problem that needs solving right now. Your brain loves problems, especially scary ones. It treats them like puzzles where the prize is survival. Neurologically, this lights up your attentional networks and floods you with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. Those chemicals don't just make you anxious, they sharpen focus. Time feels compressed. Distractions fade. You are now mentally leaning 6 inches from the screen. Good news doesn't do that. Good news is stable, predictable. It says things are okay, and your brain hears, cool, I can relax. Relaxation is great for living, but terrible for grabbing attention in a chaotic environment. Media outlets know this, algorithms know this, and your brain, bless its ancient little heart, keeps falling for it. Because every alarming headline feels like it might contain information you need to stay safe, even if it's actually just telling you about a mildly concerning economic fluctuation. Later, we'll get into how this constant alert mode slowly rewires your expectations of reality. Spoiler, it makes the world feel way more dangerous than it actually is. In short, your attention isn't weak. It's just being aggressively kidnapped. Number 8, doom equals memory glue. Ever notice how you remember terrible news in vivid detail, but forget good news almost immediately? That's not pessimism, that's biology. When something bad happens, your hippocampus, the brain's memory librarian, gets help from stress hormones that scream, "Save this file forever." Emotion acts like superglue for memory. The stronger the emotional charge, the deeper the imprint. Fear, outrage, and disgust are especially good at this. Positive news? Nice, but emotionally mild. Your brain doesn't see an urgent reason to archive it, but bad news gets stamped, laminated, and filed under important, never forget this. This is why one tragic story can overshadow dozens of positive statistics. It's also why your brain starts to believe the world is falling apart, even when long-term data says otherwise. Your memory is biased towards drama, and memory shapes perception. This sets the stage for something darker we'll hit near the top of the list: how constant exposure to bad news doesn't just grab attention, but slowly trains your brain to expect disaster as the default setting. Basically, your brain is building a highlight reel of doom, and then wondering why everything feels terrifying. Number 7, threat feels personal. You could read a headline about a meteor hitting the ocean on the other side of the planet, and your brain still goes, okay, but what if? Bad news hijacks your attention because your brain has a hard time telling the difference between relevant threat and vaguely threatening vibes. Evolution didn't train it to ask, is this statistically likely to affect me? It trained it to ask, could this kill me in a very dramatic way? So when you hear about crime, disease, economic collapse, or social unrest, your brain automatically runs a simulation starring you as the main character. You imagine versions of your future where this thing somehow spills into your life. That mental simulation is sticky. It feels important, and important things demand attention. Psychologists call this availability bias. The easier something is to imagine, the more likely you think it is. Bad news comes pre-packaged with images, emotions, and worst-case scenarios, so it's incredibly easy to picture. Good news is abstract. Things are slowly improving doesn't hit the same as everything might explode. And remember earlier when we mentioned memory glue? This is where it starts compounding. The more bad news you remember, the more personal future bad news feels. It's a feedback loop your brain runs without asking your permission. Just wait until we get to the part where your brain starts confusing information with control. That's where the real addiction forms. Basically, your brain sees every bad headline and whispers, "This could be about you," when it very much is not. Number 6, the control illusion. Here's the trap. Bad news makes you feel informed, and feeling informed feels like control. When something scary happens, your brain doesn't want comfort, it wants answers. So you keep reading, scrolling, refreshing. Each new detail feels like you're gaining mastery over the situation, like if you just understand it enough, you'll somehow be safer. Neurologically, this activates your problem-solving circuits. Dopamine gets involved, not the fun kind, but the anticipation kind, that maybe the next article will explain how to fix this kind. That's why doom scrolling feels tense but compelling, not relaxing. The twist? Most large-scale bad news is completely outside your control. Wars, pandemics, economic shifts, your extra 10 minutes of reading does not change the outcome, but your brain doesn't care. It equates information intake with preparedness, even when there's nothing to prepare for. This is the same mechanism that makes people repeatedly check flight turbulence statistics mid-air, as if the plane is waiting for their approval to continue crashing. Later, we'll connect this illusion of control to how chronic news exposure increases anxiety long-term. Spoiler, your brain starts living in permanent just-in-case mode. In short, bad news sells you the comforting lie that attention equals safety. Number 5, emotional contagion. Bad news spreads faster than good news for the same reason yawns do. You catch it. Humans are social animals with mirror neurons that automatically sync our emotions with others. When you see fear, outrage, or despair expressed intensely, your brain mirrors it before you have time to think. That's empathy doing its job, a little too well. Online, this effect gets supercharged. Headlines aren't neutral, they're emotionally loaded on purpose. Outrage drives sharing, fear drives engagement, and every emotional reaction you absorb primes you to react even harder to the next one. Over time, your emotional baseline shifts. Calm starts to feel boring, neutral feels suspicious, and intense negative emotion starts to feel normal. That's not because the world suddenly got worse, it's because your nervous system is being marinated in other people's panic. This sets us up perfectly for one of the most disturbing effects on this list, how constant bad news exposure literally trains your brain to overestimate danger everywhere. We're getting close to that one. Basically, your emotions aren't entirely yours anymore. They're being crowdsourced. Number 4, your brain loves patterns, even fake ones. Your brain is a pattern-making machine with absolutely no chill. It hates randomness, it hates chaos, and bad news is chaotic, so your brain immediately starts stitching it into a story. One bad headline is just unfortunate. 2 is concerning. 5 in a row? Now your brain decides something is happening, a trend, a decline, a collapse. Even if those stories are unrelated, spread across different countries, industries, or decades, your brain connects the dots like it's solving a conspiracy corkboard. This is called patternicity, the tendency to find meaningful patterns in noise. It evolved to help us survive. If you saw rustling bushes every time you walked past a certain area, assuming a predator lived there was a smart move. Today, that same instinct sees 3 bad economic headlines and goes, "Ah yes, society is ending." The media environment makes this worse by stacking negative stories back to back, not because things are uniquely awful, but because bad news competes better for attention. Your brain doesn't interpret this as selection bias, it interprets it as reality accelerating toward disaster. And once your brain believes it's seeing a pattern, it doubles down. It looks for more evidence. Suddenly, good news feels fake, naive, or suspiciously quiet. Bad news feels honest. This is important because in a moment, we're going to talk about how this pattern obsession quietly rewires your sense of safety. That's where anxiety stops being a reaction and starts becoming a personality trait. Basically, your brain isn't asking, is this representative? It's saying, I knew it. Number 3, anxiety feels like preparation. Here's the sneaky part. Paying attention to bad news doesn't just feel urgent, it feels responsible. Your brain confuses anxiety with readiness. If you're worried, you must be doing something useful, right? After all, calm people get caught off guard. Worried people are vigilant. Worried people survive. So when bad news makes you tense, hyper-alert, and uneasy, your brain gives you a subtle thumbs up. This is the same mechanism behind chronic overthinking. Anxiety feels like work, and work feels productive. Biologically, your nervous system shifts into low-grade fight or flight. Not enough to run, but enough to stay alert. Your muscles tense, your thoughts loop, you scan for more information, and because the threat is abstract and ongoing, the stress never resolves. The worst part? Your brain adapts. What once felt alarming starts to feel normal, so it takes more bad news to trigger the same level of concern. That's how people end up consuming increasingly extreme content, not because they enjoy it, but because their nervous system is chasing the feeling of being properly alert. And this leads directly into the most disturbing item on the list, the point where bad news doesn't just grab your attention, it reshapes your worldview. Basically, your brain thinks worrying is a survival skill. It is not. Number 2, the world starts feeling hostile. After enough exposure to bad news, something subtle shifts. The world doesn't just seem dangerous during the news, you start feeling it everywhere. Psychologists call this mean world syndrome, when your brain constantly consumes stories about violence, disaster, and corruption. It begins to assume those things are common, immediate, and nearby. Your threat radar gets recalibrated. You trust strangers less. You expect worst-case outcomes. Neutral events feel ominous. Your brain isn't panicking, it's preemptively bracing. And because fear memories are easier to recall than neutral ones, this perception reinforces itself. Statistically, many things have gotten safer over time, but your brain doesn't run on statistics, it runs on stories. And bad news supplies those stories in high-definition, emotionally charged detail. This is where attention becomes identity. You're not just watching bad news, you're living inside a mental model where danger is always just around the corner. And now, finally, we reach the core reason bad news has such a grip on you, the reason everything else on this list works at all. Number 1, your brain is a survival addict. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Bad news grabs your attention because your brain thinks it's doing its job perfectly. Your brain's primary mission is not happiness. It's not peace. It's not even truth. It's survival. And survival, in evolutionary terms, means prioritizing anything that might signal danger, even if that danger is unlikely, distant, or completely out of your control. So, when you lock on to bad news, your brain rewards itself. Tiny hits of dopamine fire not because you're enjoying the content, but because you're anticipating useful information. It's the same reward loop that keeps you checking for updates, scrolling for context, and reading just one more article. Your brain is gambling on certainty. The cruel irony is that this system evolved in a world of immediate threats and short feedback loops. See threat, react, resolve. Today, threats are abstract, endless, and unresolved. The loop never closes, so your brain stays engaged indefinitely, scanning for danger like a security guard who never gets to clock out. Over time, this creates a habit, not of curiosity, but of vigilance. Bad news feels important, necessary, even moral. Ignoring it can trigger guilt, like you're being irresponsible by not paying attention to potential catastrophe. But here's the final twist. Attention doesn't equal awareness, and awareness doesn't equal safety. Consuming more bad news rarely prepares you, it just sensitizes you. It trains your nervous system to live in a permanent state of alert for threats that mostly never arrive. So when you catch yourself frozen over a grim headline while joy scrolls past unnoticed, remember, your brain isn't broken. It's just a survival addict living in a world that profits from keeping it anxious. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.